through 18 were given the Youth at Risk survey. I know this for a fact because my grandson, who is 11, received that survey. Fortunately, he has a bit of me in him, and he told his teacher he wasn't going to answer those questions because they were none of the school's business. He was very upset when he got home and told his mom, he said, I don't do those things. A parent who retrieved a hard copy of this survey, and I have all three of them right here, did so out of concern for our students and gave me a copy. After reading through it, I realized I did not receive it because it's an equity survey. I'm going to share some of the questions with the board because I do believe that the liberal majority of you have, under Andy's leadership, rubber stamped this agenda, and I do not think it's for a kid's best interest. So some of the questions were, what is your race or ethnicity? During the past 30 days, how many days did you smoke, use marijuana, or drink alcohol? During the past 30 days, did you receive, send, or share nude photographs? Which of the following best describe you? Heterosexual, gay, lesbian, bisexual, not sure. Are you transgender? How old are you when you had your first sexual intercourse? During your lifetime, and remind you, my 11-year-old grandson received this. How many people have you had sex with? None, or it was a multiple choice, 1 through 6 or more individuals. During the past 3 months, how many people have you had sex with? The same choices. I am totally struggling with how the members of this board could be allowed this. Per our DPI report card, we ranked 114 out of 400, excuse me, trying to do that again, 414 out of 420. Our state scores for reading and math are in the mid-20s for proficiency, which means 70% of our students are not performing at proficient level. In other words, we're failing. This district has not provided our young people with the basic skills they need to work, to live independently, or to be successful. For the past 3 years, this administration has pursued a social justice learning path through its ICS equity program. And this was promoted by DPI. And it has proven to no success for our district. At a recent meeting, Dr. Sprague, you said that scores were going to decline before we see improvements. I mean, how low do we have to go? We're, what, 6 from the bottom? How many of our children's future will be required as sacrificial lambs for social justice? I don't think any of them should. And I think we really need to think what we're doing with our kids.
Thank you.
2 more requests. Thank you. Expecting the rest of those reports that I requested, there's surveys within the next week, ma'am.
Harry Brand is up next, speaking on, honestly, I can't read that. Something following board.
Carol, turn the mic off on me. I'll explain. There we go. In my experience on this board and serving as an administrative member team of a neighboring district, I never found that it was acceptable and following the directive of the board was optional. When this document, Corona Relief Funds, CRF, was presented here a month ago or so, it says option 1. Does that mean there was an option 2? We don't know. We have no idea where this came from. Did it come from committee? Did it come from the Teachers Association? Did it come from administration? We don't know. Take credit for it and own it. This didn't pass. What passed was a different plan that paid half of the stipend now and half of the stipend after the completion of this year. That hasn't happened. People received money in their account last week for the full amount. As a result, they got taxed at a higher rate. They don't have the incentive to complete the school year. And it just bothers me that what this board directs administration to do didn't happen. Who made that decision? who gave that directive to do something other than what this board passed? Because it really diminishes your effectiveness and power when people don't follow the things that you did here. The question is, did everybody that got the $1,000 perform at the same level as everyone else? I doubt that. Some people weren't here as much. Some people were here more. It doesn't tell you who the people are that were getting these payments. So I think the board should ask for an updated actual report on what was paid out by groups. How many custodians received the bonus? How many full-time teachers? How many administrators? So that you're as transparent as you can be with the people that pay for this. This ended up costing the district more money in the end because we had to pay a higher rate of taxes. If you would have paid it out in the 2 payments as was passed, these people would have got more money in their check rather than being taxed at a rate for someone that makes $52,000 or more, when there are some people in this group that got paid that don't make that much. So I'd appreciate it to, first of all, enforce the things you do here, but be more transparent and ask for a complete actual report on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. We have no student representatives report. Moving on to the consent agenda. Moving on to the consent agenda. Looking for a motion.
I move the board approve the agenda, minutes from the January 25th, 2021 Board of Education meeting, the January 17th, 2022 financial reports for January, consideration of current bills, checks number 5502 through 5617 in the amount of $307,522.08, ACH numbers 212200676 through 212200783 in the amount of $852,629.25, and one wire transfer in the amount of $17,356.55 for a total of $1,177,507.88.
Mr. President, I will be abstaining on check number 5565.
Roll call vote.
Pardo,
Yes.
Deep,
Yes.
Gagnon,
Yes.
Maddox Nelson,
Yes.
Newfeld,
Yes.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Schrader.
Yes.
I guess a point of order, there's a typographical error in here. It's January 25th, 2021. Shouldn't that be January 25th, 2022?
Yes, I'll make that change.
Mere technicality. English teacher always proofreading.
Let's move on to new business. Want to review the minutes for a second, or a motion to approve the minutes?
I move the board approve the minutes of the committee of the whole meeting on Tuesday, February 8th, 2022.
Second.
Just a voice vote, not a, what's it called when you just, we all say aye? What's the official word for that?
All in favor?
Yeah, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Got it, thanks.
I think the word is consensus.
Consensus. He says, say that again, what's he say? He says, do we have
Can we
consensus?
vote on it by consensus? And then if no one objects, then you can do what you did. That's how he handles it.
Who made the motion in the second there?
I second it.
And Mary, oh,
Thank you.
Sitting right next to you.
I know, my hearing goes.
so you gotta lean more to the microphone, Mary. Apparently you gotta be 1 inch away.
Rock star.
Let's move on to the policy manual review. Did anybody have anything they want to talk about on this? 9,000 relations.
I did. I reviewed them and then checked with Principal Rogers at the high school. I know he had encouraged board members when they were moving to sweep the hallways, if you will, and make sure kids are in class. He said stop in anytime, check it out, because they were feeling really positive about how the hallways were looking and therefore the classrooms. But I would draw the board's attention to 9150 after checking with Clint, and we feel strongly that we really appreciate when you follow this policy in arranging your visit and intention with the principal ahead of time, just as a courtesy. So thank you for that.
Anybody else? Anything? Let's move on to the continuous improvement plan, mid-year data.
Hello. Okay, there, it's working. Okay, I'm a little unsure because usually I like to switch the slides on my own, but it looks like someone's operating from afar. So I'm just going to see how this goes. All right, good evening. So not just myself, but me and the admin principal team will be presenting to you our mid-year data. So it'll be me, and then we'll switch to secondary and then elementary updates as we go through. So the slides are on the screen. They're also included in your board docs packet if you'd like to look there. So this is a continuation. If you think back to the fall, we shared with you some data regarding our initial benchmarking that we did with our students in the fall. From there, we created some baseline data. That's a lot of the data our teachers use to then create what's called an SLO, which is their goal for the year that they track. They use data. They adjust their instruction. They enlist other teachers for help. They talk about it at the building. The buildings also make goals. So this is really a well-rounded data piece that our staff use very regularly. So on the first page, you can just see a reiteration of our district goals. We're really focusing on the first goal this year. At this presentation. So the academic achievement goal. So you can read that to yourself. It should look familiar, and we'll refresh it in a couple minutes when we get close to reviewing the district data. I also want to just draw your attention to slide number 3, showing you that systemic process that we're trying to go through. We never before have had, or we've had really clear alignment between our district goals, our school goals, and then our teacher goals aligned to those school goals. So we're really trying to create a system where each of our goals then feeds up into the next level to create a plan that's really comprehensive for our students' learning and success. Any questions so far? We're still doing good? All right. So we're going to get just into our district demographics. These are very, very similar to what we shared in the fall. There's just some slight discrepancies, which you can see marked with an asterisk. That only means that there's less than 1% difference in those numbers, however, so it's not, there weren't a lot of extraordinary changes in any of our demographics. If you do note, this source here is we track third Friday count, and then second Friday count is another big day when we mark our students, so all of this data is based on second Friday count. And that also includes the next page with the changes in our race and ethnicity. Again, not a lot of extraordinary changes as a district in any of those categories, but just an update for you there so you can see our student population and what different groups we have. Anytime we do a data report out to DPI or anything, we're expected to share out these numbers, and so I think it's just good to keep that at the forefront when we start to look at our district data as well. All right, so now we're just going to do a brief little overview. This is a review of our goal that I shared earlier with you. So we're looking to increase proficiency on our forward exam, ACT Aspire, and ACT in reading and math. The data we're sharing today is not any of those. We're sharing with you FastBridge data, which is a screener, and those screeners help us to know and take a little temperature how to adjust our instruction during the school year. So you can see here a little more of an explanation of FastBridge. We're really using this information to inform teacher practice and their planning and their instruction. So it's nice to also be able to triangulate data, use the ACT, use the forward exam to see where are we at, not only in our FastBridge data, but ACT and then our classroom data. But this is really the real time how we can adjust a little bit more quickly than waiting for a yearly exam of board exam or ACT. So now we're going to jump into our district reading proficiency. I want to remind you, this is a district level. So this is 2 groups of our students. The reason we split them between K1 and grades 2 and 11 is because there's 2 different assessments that they take. Our K1 students are taking what's called an early reading screener, and then our grades 2 through 11 students are taking a different test that's more consistent amongst that age group. So there you can see that one snapshot in time. You can see what the different percentiles, what the colors are representing. Percentiles, these are compared to their nationally normed peers. So that was a question that was brought up last time, is the comparison group. We have reported to you at some point benchmarks, which is comparing self to self, and it was asked that we compare to our national norms. So we did alter that and adjust that. So the data that you'll see today is all nationally normed data. In a minute, I'll get to longitudinal data because that had also been asked for, and it kind of gives a little bit better frame of reference as well to show how this is in comparison to previous years.
So this one is proficiency, the
Correct.
first graph. Okay.
That was proficiency, yep. The next slide, however, JD, is growth. So when we talk about students growing, you want students growing relatively in the same amount of growth as their peers, which is how we've compared this here. This, again, is compared to their nationally normed peers. And what we're seeing is that we have 56% of our K1 students, which is on the left, growing at the rate that they their peers and even accelerated. Now you might think, well, that's kind of, I don't know what that means really. Last year, our number was 11% less than that. So this year we have our K1 students growing at a higher expected rate as their peers than we did last year. For grade 2 through 11 students, they are growing at a 71% of our student population is growing at a rate similar to their peers in that college pathway or that low risk area. And that's an increase of 3% compared to last year at this time, the growth rate. And remember that 2 through 11 is a lot higher population, so it's really harder to see incremental changes when you have hundreds more students than you might in a K1 group, where that's only a couple hundred students. So smaller changes that we can see in the 2 through 11, which you'll also see in the longitudinal data as we move forward.
Amy, one more time for me.
Yeah.
So how do I know the difference? 71% of the students, how do you look at that number compared to the norm? Or, I mean, to the benchmark nationally?
Okay, we're looking at norms, not benchmarks.
Okay.
So that means that 71% of our students are growing at a low risk or a college rate, which is similar to, that's all of their peer groups, like in comparison to how their peers that age are growing as well in their learning. And what you really want to see in a growth rate is you want to see that number as close to 80% in a healthy system as you can, where 80% of your students would be in that blue bar. So we're not there yet as a system. We are in 1 mark, which will be exciting to share in just a minute or two, but we're getting there and making progress. So when you see that plus 11 in that K1, that was 11% more of our students are growing at the rate that's expected in comparison to last year.
Okay, so it's growing at the rate that's expected. Okay, I got it. That makes sense.
Yeah. Good questions and good clarification. And I'll share with you too, like as a group of principals and myself, we're getting better every time at not only reading, interpreting, but hopefully reporting out to you in a way that's understandable and giving you the meaningful data that you're hoping to see, because it's a process for us to grow too, and we're getting a little bit better every time, I feel. So that's kudos to them. A lot of good conversation. So here you can see this is just focusing on our K1 students. So when you look at our K1 students, on the left you see last year, the winter snapshot. On the right you see this year, the winter snapshot. So you can see some, if you take them like by color, it might be easier to do a comparison than to try to look at them in its whole entity. But you can see where mid-year last year, we saw a dip in our green, which is not what we would want to see. Those are the low-risk students. And low risk isn't the best word. We've wrestled with, do we change that language? But then it filters down into all of the reports, and it might get confusing if we're using multiple words for the same thing. But what that really means is on track. We saw a dip last year, and then we saw an increase in that high-risk population. It's exciting to note that we did not see that this year. We actually see a slight increase, and we see students from that high risk moving to the some risk category. So what that means is that students are then not only achieving or growing at the expected rate, but at an accelerated rate to move into that next category perhaps. So they're having to stay up to track with their peers, but then also maybe do a little bit more to get them into that next category. So we're seeing some movements in the right direction. If we scroll to the next one for grades 2 through 11, remembering this is a much larger student population, this is more hundreds of students, grades 2 through 11. So we saw a slight dip last year and an increase in that red, but this year we see pretty comparable results. We don't see a dip like we did last year, and we see a slight improvement towards that college pathway marking actually. So again, higher population of students, but we do see stability, and we see a little bit of marked improvement as well. So that was reading as a district. Please know that each level will then report out on their specific data as well. This is just to give you the district lens. So math, similar forms of reporting out again. We tried to be as consistent as possible. So here you can see that K1, again, they have a different set of assessments. They're looking at early math skills, and then they're looking at a more consistent format for 2 through 11. K and 1, the pace of learning is very quick, very rapid, so there's a lot of changing expectations with their assessments. So here you can see we have a high number of students in our K1 who are performing in the low risk and college pathway area. And then if we keep scrolling, we'll see some targeted growth for our students. Here's the exciting point that we're wanting to share with you, where we see we hit that 80% of our K and 1 students in math, showing that growth that we're hoping to see as a district. And I'll let the elementary speak to some of the things that they've done to help that out a little bit. But that's very exciting to see that we're seeing not only high rates of growth, but improvements from last year at this time. So you can see that K1 group, that's higher, 7% higher points than last year at this time in the growth. And then also for the 2 through 11 group, a 4% increase from last year at this point.
So this slide shows K through 11, that's 2 through 11, right?
K1 is on the left.
Oh, sorry, never mind, yep.
Yep,
okay.
no, that's okay.
Yeah.
K1's on the left, and then 2 through 11 is on the right. So just always keeping in mind that K1 group is a much smaller population. Okay, so then when we look at the comparison data, this is for just K1. Now we're focusing on that smaller number of students. Again, last year we experienced that mid-year dip. We did not see that this year. We're seeing growth again in that math area. It's exciting to see the college pathway percentage increasing to 17% compared to 10% last year. So that's for our K1 students. When we look at our 2 through 11 students, you'll see that the numbers are much more stable. Again, last year they didn't, they're pretty similar to last year when we look at that. But we did have a slight increase again in our college pathway for 2 through 11. But what's exciting to see is we don't have those dips. Last year, I'm not going to lie, it was hard to come to you and show you some data that was showing some struggles mid-year, and we've really done a good job using some team structures, using the data, and our teams of teachers to plan around with the leadership of their principals. So if we look at some of our conclusions as we look at the district-wide data, we just wanted to summarize our students are increasing in their proficiency. Again, not what appear to be accelerated rates in all places, but we are seeing some increases, and we're growing at higher rates than we were in the past at this point. And our teams have really targeted their efforts to not only skill build, but fill those gaps that we know are existent from COVID. And we're really working to try to target those. So we want to continue to see some of these upward trends as we round the bend into spring. And I just want to give kudos to all the teachers, support staff, and We have a lot of people supporting our students in math and ELA to try to build those skills and target them as needed for each individual student. So those are some generalized conclusions. We'll move into secondary with Clint and Heather, and then the elementary principals with their synopsis as well. Clint?
Thank you. All right, one thing that I want to point out when we look at proficiency, as we look at this first proficiency chart, Ben, there we go, is that you're going to see a proficiency chart for A reading, and then you're going to see that growth. So when you look at proficiency, if we were doing it in terms of running, and you had some markers on there, a 10-minute mile, an 8-minute mile, a 6-minute mile, and a 5-minute mile, and that's how, if you're in high risk, you're in the 10-minute mile or above mark. So to move from this proficiency mark in the 10-minute mile to here, which is the 8-minute mile, you'd have to get under 8 minutes. So if you're at 8 minutes and 1 second, even if you were at 12 minutes before and you moved to 8 minutes and 1 second, you're still in that red category. You may have made a lot of growth, but you're not in the red category yet. And so when you look at the proficiency, that's just where they're at. And when we look at the growth, that's how much they've grown. So keep in mind there, even if a kid has made that expected growth compared to their peers, they may not have jumped categories yet. So I hope that is a good visual for when we go through this. So this is our A reading proficiency first, and we see that green bar, which is that low risk category, as the highest mark on there, which is awesome. But we want to move some of those kids in the red, and we'll talk at the end about some pieces that the high school is doing to try to move those. The next slide you'll see is that growth mark. So, there's one other thing that I forgot to point out. When you see these little numbers in here, those are not percentages. They are the actual number of students that are calculated in that growth or proficiency rate. And that's true for all of our presentations here. So we've got a lot of students in the blue, but if you look percentage-wise, like Amy said, we're still not quite there as far as the 80%. We want at least 80% in a healthy system to be growing at their expected rates or above. So now we're going to take a look at A math. And the A math proficiencies, you see some higher numbers there in the green and a little bit lower numbers there in the red. And when we look at our A math growth, which is the next slide, you'll see that we really have a higher number of students in that blue growth for A math. So there's some celebrations to be had there, that we have a higher percentage of students that are growing at or above their expected rates for A math. And there is, actually let's go to the conclusions because I'm describing some of that. So seeing higher proficiencies in A math in grades 10 and 11, and we're seeing that higher, or that percentage of students grow at expected rates in A math this year. Some continued efforts. We've got to look at enhancing some universal practices in reading, including disciplinary literacy, and SLOs, which is student learning objectives related to that CIP, which is our continuous improvement plan, which are those goals that Amy talked about at the beginning. So we've got some ideas on how we can make that a little more seamless. And also a continued data analysis efforts at the high school and across the district that we're looking at to improve that instruction through collaborative meetings. And I'll drop an example from one of our teams at the high school, so you can see kind of how they're using data on a week-to-week basis in terms of looking at that data and then adjusting their instruction accordingly. Heather.
so we'll start with our A reading. The biggest celebration that we had right now is our 6th grade. You'll see on this report a proficiency, and then also in the growth that our 6th grade ELA did hit the mark for 80%. So how does that happen? Well, this isn't the first year that we've used the workshop model, and we do have teachers here at the middle school that have used it longer. So we are making some correlations with that, along with small group and our coaches assisting, etc. With our ELA, our A reading proficiency, you can see that we definitely have areas to improve. We've got students that are in the red. We have students that are struggling readers. And what do we do about that? We have title services. We have small group instruction. Our 4th grade, we're still taking that hit, I think, when they transition into the middle school. So we still need to do better with that as well. And then we are happy that we are seeing some more students into that proficiency rate. And I think, Clint, you did a really nice job giving an example of what that looks like, because we do have a lot of students that are close to moving into that next proficiency, but they're not hitting the exact mark they need. So it's good to see that we have some more students moving into the college pathway. And then with our A reading growth, again, those are the student numbers. So if we take a look at the actual percentage, we are at 64% when it comes to our low college for 4th grade. So we're off that 80% mark. When we get to 5th grade, we're at 71% currently, just slightly off. And then at 6th grade, we hit the 84% for our low college growth. And with our 7th grade, we're in that 65% range. So from last year to this year, we have seen some longitudinal growth with that. And last year in comparison, most of our levels were at, our low college were at about 65%. And now you can see that most of them are increasing to that rate. So we're seeing some gains. And then we have our A math. And here, again, it's very similar. You've got students in red, we've got some students in green, and then we're trying to increase our increase our college pathway. You can see, which is really good to see in 7th grade, we do offer an advanced math class. And so we have about 17 students currently in that. So the comparison, and we look at the exact students, that is a good correlation to that particular class that we're having at this point in time. So they're continuing to grow at that rate, whereas in the fall we didn't have 12 in there, even though students were placed in an advanced math class just based on different types of assessments. We're seeing that correlation there a little bit, so that's good. And then here's our growth. And again, with our A math, we are looking at all of our rates in that low college are at 60% or higher. Again, currently our 6th grade is at 75%, and the mark is 80% for this growth. And then when we look at the lower ends of high and some, last year we had more in that 40% range in that red, and now this year we've decreased. So if you take a look at these numbers here, 4th and 5th grade, I had to update that. So what you have is not correct on that document. So for 4th grade, it should be 37 students in the red, 59 students in the blue. And in 5th grade, it should be 46 students in the red and 72 students in the blue. We caught that error today. So that was a good error to catch. That was for A math. Yep. So again, 4th grade should really be 37 students in the red for A math growth. And for the blue low college, there should be 59 students there. And then in 5th grade, it should be 46 in the red and 72 in the blue. So that was an error that we caught again today. All right, so what are we doing? We have a lot of different PLC organizational groups that we meet weekly in order to look at data. There's common formative assessments. We do look at the FastBridge. That is obviously 3 times a year. So our teachers are really working on what are we seeing, what are the assessments we can do weekly with our students, mainly in math and ELA, and how are we adjusting our instruction. And let's say that if Julie's teaching math and I'm teaching math in 4th grade, a big part of that conversation is, okay, let's take a look at our students. And, oh, Julie, looks like your students were able to grasp this a little bit more than mine. So what are you maybe doing that I'm not doing, and vice versa. And those conversations are taking place. I know they're taking place at all levels. The beauty of the middle school and the high school is we have each other right in the same building. So we can have those meetings, those collaboration, those data conversations much more fluently than the elementary currently can have. All right, so when we take a look at our celebrations, we had a really high rate. 98% of our students did take this mid-year assessment. So that's just a lot of kudos to our teachers, because we know with a lot of absences, let's say we're all taking it on Tuesday, there's 15 kids gone. It's the teacher's responsibility to make sure those students get this test done when they return, and or figure out who else can help them take the assessment. So we're very proud of that. And this year's our scores are more stable. Last year we were looking at it longitudinal, and we noticed that we're definitely on the upswing from year to year at this time. Not as much as we probably want, but we're making a change. And last year we had a lot of our students still at this point in the year remote. So we're happy that they're here in the building and they're taking their FastBridge test here at school, because they were able to take it at home, and you just never know what that really looks like with data. 6th grade growth score, as I noted before, in both ELA and math, we are close to 80%, and ELA we did hit that mark. Staff teams, we're targeting efforts. We're really trying to adjust our times, and are we being intentional with our instruction? Are we using the time the way it's intended? Are we also being ready to respond to our students if they need regulation, or if they need counseling, or other types of things involved? Because every student needs a little bit of something different, but yet you still need to keep teaching at a pace. So we're being very intentional about that. And right now we're doing a coaching cycle where we're focusing on small group instruction, so that teachers understand how to group students and what that looks like. What are some of the different strategies that can happen in a small group? Because once they leave the teacher for the lecture or the lesson, be it 10-15 minutes, the minute they go back, they put their hands right up, and they want that teacher right next to them again, helping them through everything, every single step of the way. So how can we, instead of running to 15 different students all day long, how can we have more intentional small group and meet the students' needs? So that is a big thing that we're working on right now. Anything else?
Will you talk about the recess thing for a minute? What? The recess thing.
Oh, okay. So one of the things that we took a look at with 4th grade is when we came up with their schedule earlier this year, it's very scripted as to what needs to get done. And then there's also time for recess, etc. So with recess, we had 20 minutes allotted in addition to their lunch recess. And what we noticed was that transition time was taking a lot of time, especially right now during the winter months. And so after talking about this and taking a look at our information and looking at our intentional teaching, we're like, okay, so our students still need a break. What could that look like for the time being, so that we can be more intentional with math? Because math was down to 60 minutes this year, whereas last year we had 75 minutes allotted to it. Why does that happen? There's interactive read aloud, there's phonics that needs to be done. There's a lot of different minutes, and it might look like 20 minutes is enough for a lesson, but the reality is there's transitions all day. So in talking through that with our staff, we not only looked at that recess time, we also looked at the end of the day where we're having our win, which is what I need time. We're adjusting that as well. So we just kind of adjusted the whole type of schedule. Is this really what's going on during the day? Are we being intentional with our time? Are the kids getting the break that they need? Obviously, recess is very necessary. So we're just doing this for the time being to try the large movement break inside the classroom. And and that doesn't mean they're on a computer, they're not on their Chromebook. That is not the intent. Everybody's being very creative. We met 3 times last week. In the classrooms, the transitions have been smoother. We also noticed that regulating the kids when they come back in after recess, that's a whole nother regulation piece, because we don't, sometimes that peer interaction isn't the best in a setting that may not have all the things that they need outside. So we're giving that a try, and it's not forever and ever, but I did share that out with families, and we will keep reviewing what that looks like. And we have a system set up right now where it's also looking at math, because our 4th graders, they do get tested in all 4 content areas in the forward exam. That's stressful for everybody. So then when you look at like math today, we sat down and they did some pacing, and they're like, okay, well, we're not going to talk about geometry with our 4th graders till May. And they haven't had this information yet, but yet they're going to be tested on the forward exam. How are we going to provide this information to our students? So that's where that 10-minute increment kind of came in, like, okay, if we do this intentionally for the next 30 days, that we're hoping that that intentional time is going to be able to provide the time that at least we're providing the information that was going to be missed. We weren't going to be able to get to it. So that's the recess conversation.
Is it worse to extend the school day?
What was that?
Is it worse to just extend the school day? You know, another half hour, another hour, you think parents should be more excited about that?
You know, time is time, but what you do with the time is what's necessary. I don't know who will be excited for what. It just depends. But all I know is that our 4th and 5th grade especially, we're really looking at what our schedules are entailed. We actually have 20 minutes in the mornings where there's SEL time 2 times a week. Well, we're going to keep that 2 times a week, but how have we been using that other 3 days a week in that morning, that 15, 20 minutes? Well, we're eating breakfast in the classroom. And in 4th grade, I'm going to be honest with you, it looks really different than 5th, 6th, and 7th. We're lining up, going to the bathroom and washing our hands yet. We're not doing that in 5th, 6th, and 7th grade. So everything just really takes more time, but you also have to provide that nurturing so that they feel comfortable and safe at school as well. So time is always, we can always do better. And I'm just very proud of our teachers for thinking about what we can do to improve, but not like just sit there. We're gonna review, and we're obviously gonna keep adjusting.
What's the general feedback from staff or students since this change, specific to 4th grade with the recess?
Well, I think it's different because, you know, with the weather, a lot of times we weren't outside for recess anyway, so the kids were sitting in front of a Chromebook doing some of these activities. So I feel that they're thinking, wow, we haven't done brain breaks really during the class day, and they're having fun with it. Maybe it's a novelty because it's kind of starting out, but we as teachers, we talked about that. Like, you can't keep doing the same large movement or brain break activity in the class each day. You have to keep changing that up so that it is still exciting and the kids want to participate in it. So, the teachers, they're very excited to have the opportunity to extend into the math instruction. But they're also very knowledgeable that this has to be very intentional with movement break. It is not on a Chromebook or sitting just talking. They're doing would you rather have pizza or spaghetti, and then whatever they want, they go to the side, and they could be doing jumping jacks, they could be doing sit-ups, all that could be done right in the classroom right now. Nothing's better than getting outside, so we know that. We also extended time at the end of our lunch recess because they're the last ones to have recess. So we've extended 5 to 10 minutes every other day or so just to see, to give them a little additional time because they already have their snow pants on then. And that's just one less transition. So that's another thing that we did accommodate Wednesday last week.
Thank you.
Okay.
right, so, is that? All right, so last group, elementary group, we're not only providing you our mid-year data, we're also reporting out on our AGR requirements. And maybe some background is appropriate to talk about what is AGR, or Achievement Gap Reduction. Some of you might be familiar with SAGE. So this is the old SAGE. So AGR was started in 2015-16 and then completely replaced SAGE funding in 2017-18. So with that, our requirements that elementary schools report out after each semester performance data related to those goals that are set to improve achievement. So that's what we're doing here in the mid-year, and then we'll be back again like we've done in the past in the spring. So with AGR, there's like 3 major funding areas or targeted areas. So there's one-on-one tutoring, and that can be put in place. There's instructional coaching. You've kind of heard that already. Strategies that are used at the secondary level. And then there is class size reduction, or keeping the ratio 18:1 or 30:2 in the classroom. So we're fortunate to work with Tim on how we're using those funds to work on many of those goals. The slide here shows strategies are coaching and that classroom, working on that classroom ratio, student-teacher ratio. And I think I may have mentioned it, but it's only for kindergarten through 3rd grade. Funding is available for that. So we can go to the next slide. I don't know who's switching those.
We don't either, Tom.
I should mention this before I talk about this. So in addition to those major areas that we talked about, or that were displayed, we're using funds for not only coaches that we have coming into the district for literacy and math. We also have fortunate to have our own internal coaches now in math. So you know, when we have other teachers that step into those leadership roles, those classroom instructional areas, that brings a lot of clout to their position, and staff are more likely to listen and adopt what they're suggesting. They just completed a really nice professional learning session at our last PD day, and went very well. So we're really excited about that. And that group gets external coaching from the Wisconsin Math Institute. And other support we're working on is IA support during the wind time. How do we better support kids that still need additional support? So there's a variety of ways that we're using the funding. And so like you saw earlier, this is our demographics at the elementary level. Again, there's some asterisks there where it shows, you know, less than a 2% change. So like Amy said, not much of a change in enrollment and the different subgroups there. And this slide shows breakdown of our ethnic and race distribution or percentages in our at the elementary level. I'm going to pass it on to Rachel.
Okay, so I'm just here to talk about our goals, and something that you should know is that AGR funds are tied not to the district but to each school. So we all get a little bit slightly different funding based on the number of students we have that are on free and reduced lunch. So it's not a big difference, but that does lead us to some flexibility in maybe a different hire or a different goal that we might need to reach for our own buildings although we do collaborate with each other on these goals, and we meet every week to talk about how things are going. So all of our AGR goals are tied to that district continuous improvement plan. Our school goals are tied to that district communication or improvement plan, and all of our building SLOs and our teacher SLOs. So everything starts right at the student level and continues up to the teacher level, to our building level, and then up to the district level, so that everyone can see how everything is tied together. So some of us have chosen to have our goals based on the growth, so that's why we are happy to show you both of those slides, both on the growth and on the proficiency. And then some of us have chosen to write our goals strictly on proficiency. Any questions on that?
All right, so now we're gonna look at our reading proficiency. So this is kindergarten through third grade reading proficiency. Just a reminder that the kindergarten first grade students use the early reading assessment, and then the second and third grade have the A reading assessment. So this is our winter benchmark assessment. And again, we had talked last winter that at the younger grades, the testing and the assessment does change just a little bit. As the students are learning more, the assessments do change. So, for example, in the fall for first grade, they were assessed on word segmenting, decodable words, sight words, first 150 sight words, and sentence reading. And then in the winter, some of those tests were the same, such as word segmenting, decodable words, and sight words. However, then they added the CBM reading instead of the sentence reading. So see how there's a little bit of a change, but again, as their instruction changes and they learn more, we're assessed more or differently. So you'll notice there is more concern in the first grade level, as we do see 60 students that were high risk in the winter. And I do have some charts that I'll hand out in just a second that do show some comparable data so that you can see what the score, what the proficiencies and the growth were in comparable for the fall to the winter, as our slideshow does not represent that. The next slide discusses and shows the reading growth. So some celebrations for here, as you'll see, the second and third grade, both second and third grade did grow higher than 80%. So second grade showed a growth for the low risk and college pathway at 84% of our students, and third grade 81%. And again, the other thing that I wanted to note was the high and some risk. That is the percentile that I look at is a 30th percentile, so it's growing 30% or lower than same age peers. And for the low risk to college pathway, it's higher than 30%. For math proficiency, as you'll notice, all of our students, there is a higher percentage for the on track or for that low risk category. And one thing that I want to know that I'll show you for math too is what our comparable is. Once you start looking at the growth, we have some huge, exciting things to share. And we have put a lot of effort in the last couple of years towards math. We're doing a lot more learning around math. We're working on standards work. As Tom had mentioned, we've contracted with Paige Richards from the Math Institute of Wisconsin, and we provide coaching support to our math coaches to support our teachers, as well as to provide math intervention. So the last slide here on our data is our math growth. And really happy to present that the growth rates, you'll know that the lowest growth rate was 75%, or 78. The first grade, the low and college pathway, was 78%. And for kindergarten was 81%, second grade 85%, and third grade 84%. So 3 of our grade levels are over that 80%, which is what our target is for that growth. As I mentioned, The other thing that we've really been focusing on with the coaching support from the Math Institute of Wisconsin is the focus on math practices. So not just the curriculum that we have, but also focusing on the math practice, as well as when Paige Richards from the Math Institute of Wisconsin comes to provide professional development, she provides professional development to our coaches. Our coaches then present to our staff. And Paige also comes in 4 times this year. She'll be presenting fishbowl demonstrations, so similar to how we had with Nicole Lair from CISA 6, that she's been presenting some fishbowl demonstrations. We've been doing that with math as well. And as I mentioned, the math support at the elementary.
You say fishbowl, you mean she's going to do a demonstration?
Yeah,
to
yep.
students or something?
Yeah, so she does a demonstration. So she'll be actually coming here again soon. But so she'll present in a classroom. She'll use that classroom and be the teacher. And then we bring other teachers in to watch. And then they also discuss and collaborate afterwards. So as I mentioned, I wanted to share some comparable data. And I apologize that we didn't add it into the slides. So thanks. Thanks, Tom. So I know sometimes you're curious on some comparables, and I really wanted to show you the comparables. So as Tom's bringing it around, there's one side that's focused on reading, and then the other side that's focused on math. On the top, you'll notice for reading, it has a proficiency from winter, or from fall to winter. And then on the bottom, on the reading side, is the growth from last year winter to this year winter. So one thing I really want you to focus in on, if you could look at the reading side and the growth, in last year, winter growth, just even looking specifically at kindergarten, and then specifically kindergarten this year, we did see a large decline last year for kindergarten, and this year it's totally flipped. We have provided more supports at the kindergarten. We started implementing using the 95% group resource, focusing on phonological and phonemic awareness. And so we have really seen some large growth areas with that. And then if you flip to the back side, it has the math proficiency at the top from fall to winter. And then you'll also notice the winter growth from last year and this year. And just the amount of growth that we're seeing this year with all of the supports we've been putting in for math, it's just a huge celebration for our staff, and most specifically our 3 support teachers for math. They've really been working hard to provide that additional learning for our staff and for our students. Any questions regarding the data?
Could it be that if you look at 2021 and then you look at the 21-22, if you look at the kindergarten in 2021 and you look at the first grade in 21-22,
I was going to say.
Absolutely.
you have a decline. Could that be it's the same cohort? And
It
the
is.
reason that your kindergarten is better is you have a smarter cohort there.
Correct.
And that's what was on the other slides I was going to bring up. I think it was on slide 12 or 14. When you see that increase in the K2 to K11, whereas the K and K1, there's a change this year for the better, it's probably because of the cohort. Did we actually make a difference in that last year's K to first grade?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when you look at the winter reading growth from last year to this year, if you look at last year's kindergarten and then this year's first grade, that is that same cohort. So you'll notice that there were 61 students last winter in kindergarten that scored at the high and some risk. And this year, those students are in first grade, and there's 58. But you'll also notice that there were 30 students last year in kindergarten that scored the low risk to college pathway, and this year there's 49. So yes, as you mentioned, that is that same cohort. We are still seeing some concerns in that area, but they are growing.
The other thing is that when you make the comparison from kindergarten in everyone, kindergarten to first to second, and second to third, in all categories, there are more kids in the blue area this year than the
There were.
previous year, so
Yes.
that's wonderful.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I have some questions in general, not necessarily to bother you with,
Oh, that's okay.
but I don't know if
Regarding elementary,
I-
because we can
sort
share
of-
the mic.
Sort of. We keep talking about our low overall ranking, and without doing anything different instructionally, if we somehow rearranged our buildings with a magic wand and had third and fourth grade in the same building again, we would get our growth score back. So we would go up a bunch. That's how we could beat White Lake on some scores on a forward exam, but it was much lower overall rating. Have you guys heard anything from DPI? Is there some way we can do that without reorganizing the buildings? Because if people are really just looking at that score, we're going to keep getting crushed if we're only getting our elementary schools when we're at 80% economically disadvantaged and we're competing against the very richest districts. Without that growth score, we're going to get nailed every year, no matter how good our growth is.
You're right, JD, and we did ask that question. It really goes against what we're trying to do because the report card, you're exactly right, because we cannot have a growth score calculated into our third to fourth grade, we lose out. That means that our achievement data, and in Rachel's case at West, we talked about how many students took the forward exam. 21. And so on those little ones' shoulders, you know, we have an entire community and state judging our district and West Elementary. That's a lot of pressure, which no one at DPI intends, but that's how it is. So we asked JD about that, and we asked, can we count our district as one school, if you will, grades 3 through 7, so we can count that growth score and just have different campuses? And the answer was no. But they're very aware of why we feel negatively affected by that. They just haven't figured out how to right that inequity yet.
It makes me wonder if we could if the surrounding school districts use FastBridge, at least if we could put our growth scores up against their growth scores and the achievements, at least then people could look at something else. Because it's sort of complicated to say, well, look at the achievement and the growth on this report card, and it's weight differently depending on your poverty level, and it's hard to have that message out there, because at the same time we'd love to have really high achievement, but it's also really hard, and then it's, you know, harder on the teachers too when people are critical and they lost their growth score because of what the board did. You know, and that's not like and we never thought of that 4 superintendents ago, but we
So
figured
you
it
bring
out.
up a good point though, because we asked other questions about that. So we've already started, when you talk about comparing our FastBridge scores or comparing other scores, creating an elementary report card is something we've already started looking at with our CESA 9 support, because that one measure of a third grader on that one day isn't telling the story of what happens in an elementary school from the time they're in 4K through third grade. So although that's something that isn't necessarily state reported, quote unquote, that's something that could help us tell more of the story of a complete learner in an elementary. And also remember, when we're comparing those 4K through 3 buildings, those are being compared most likely to K5 buildings or 4K5 buildings. So it's not really comparing apples to apples when we look at the state report card for our elementary schools.
Another thing that I questioned was we have 75% of our report card on achievement and 25% on attendance. So I asked, well, what attendance is that? Who is that? It counts K through 3 attendance, yet in kindergarten, you're not required to go to school until you're 6. So we can't even, you know, students that aren't coming to school in kindergarten who aren't 6, we really have no legal recourse for truancy because compulsory attendance doesn't start until you're 6. So that's also digging us on that. So, but our students are more than that report card. There's a lot more good things going on in our schools than that report card indicates, as you can see. So, yes, is this still on?
Yep.
Okay. Dr. Deep, you did notice that cohort. It is a cohort that we brought up to you last year. We are very concerned with them, that first grade group. I've talked to principals across the state. That first grade group is a concern in a lot of different places because they were in 4K when the pandemic started. So they didn't get their full 4K experience and then spent, 6 months in isolation, essentially in their home, or with maybe an extended relative, weren't getting that interaction with their peers, weren't getting that solid, phonological phonemic awareness instruction that we know our 4K teachers are offering. Then came to kindergarten. A lot of kindergarten schools were remote last year. We know we were 4 days a week, but had some quarantines. So there's just a whole lot of things that are stacked against this group of kids that we know, but we're really pleased with that growth. They're not there yet, but we put a lot of support in first grade to start the year this year across our district because we know that's where we need it. But yes, kindergarten, last year at winter, this time, 41 of our kindergartners were at risk. And this year, kindergarten, we only have 14. So that's a huge celebration. Our kindergarten teachers have really dug deep into this data. It's our 3rd year with Fastbridge. We now know what's expected in winter. They now know this is where kindergartners should be in winter based on the national norms. Kindergartens across the country are able to do these things. So now they've adjusted their pacing and can see the results of the work that they've put in. So that's just a big celebration. And then we have so many people stepping in to fill those gaps. Like Tom mentioned, we've got IAs taking small groups. We've got, our math and our support teachers helping out. Just a team effort trying to make sure that our kids are getting what they need when they need it. So we're going to continue to see that upward trend in ELA and math. We're really excited. We're positive. We're seeing the efforts of their growth, of the students, of the staff. We're continuing to target those skills, and we're just going to continue to prioritize where we put our funding and where we put people and resources where we know our kids need it.
Okay, so if we could just scroll a little bit. Rachel just went through the conclusion for the elementary, and then I just have a couple of things I just wanted to wrap up. If you could go one more, thank you. So this is just a reminder of that goal that we're working towards, and know that a lot of these supports and services that we're talking about, the funding, the people, the things that we're doing, those are all aligned to what we wrote into our continuous improvement plan, not only in the district level, but then the building levels. And we're really trying to streamline our efforts, thinking about how we could use funding differently for those positions that one school might need versus another school. Thinking about how we use that structure of time, the middle school talked about that, and using it to its best ability for the students when they need it. So I'm really, this is a much different presentation, I feel, than mid-year last year, because last year it was a little bit with a sadder message, but I really want to acknowledge just all the hard work that people are putting in, from the teachers to the principals to the support staff, to really make the best efforts forward for all of our students. And we know that regaining some of those losses from COVID are going to take a little bit longer, but we're seeing some improvements, and we're proud of that.
Has there been any discussion, I guess more centered around the first grade class, when we talked COVID and last year to this year and things, that we didn't mention masking, and it just seems like that would also have been, a barrier when we look at data and collaborations and interventions and things. I'm just curious if there's discussion on how masking may have impacted achievement or reading due to the inability to see lips and pronunciation and things like that.
I'm not aware of any conversations, but I'm not a part of perhaps speech and language conversations or different. I know they used shields as opposed to different things. And when Rachel speaks to a lot of those social interactions and things, that's where a lot of that foundation comes in 4K, about the interactions, the responses to, the hearing it. It's really a lot of that rhyming, see and hearing the songs, the how you're saying things, and so just the sheer fact that we were out of that routine too for a few months, that can be really hard too when those are really critical months. So I can't speak to that specifically. I don't know.
I was just curious if it's come up at all and how it would play a role in the data or collections or, you know, responses and how we change things or do things. I was just curious.
Amy, going forward now, that cohort that I brought up, they will be clubbed with that K2 to 11 going forward. Do we have something in place that you could probably assess them separately to see where they are with their growth, or are they still struggling, you know, next year or the year after? Because you just don't want to keep passing them off to the next grade. How do we get them so that they are performing at par or exceeding it, just like you're showing me the other grades?
So I think that the schools are already doing a lot to put things in place where they're getting almost double doses of some of those core content areas. Not only are they in the universal, but then there might be a small group within where they're getting some reteaching on skills that they need, and then maybe even a third time later in the day where there's a different structure. So we really, when we know something, we're really paying close attention to it now. So I don't know if you recall back last year, but with that kindergarten data, we had seen a dip in kindergarten for 3 years in a row. So when we adjusted really targeting kindergarten this year moving in, we addressed that variable, but then there was the COVID variable that then was also a factor for the first grade team and the students there too. So now that we are really cognizant of that, we're hypersensitive to what we're doing. And I know that they've already made adjustments from this mid-year data in their buildings to address that more deeply. So we will be keeping a close eye on it and bringing back spring data to you in a few months.
Thank you.
Yep.
I think that, I don't think this anomaly with the kindergarten first grade, that's not exclusive to us. I think it's probably a nationwide thing. And my guess is, over time, I think you'll see that even out. As long as we keep trying, I think it's gonna be an issue, but I don't think it's insurmountable.
Yeah, we don't ever want to think of it as insurmountable. It's really, K and 1 are key and when you're learning your reading skills and to become a reader. So we have to ensure that we build that toolbox for them to be readers so that they can, you know, get to 3rd grade and then they're accomplishing reading and content and synthesizing that and not just reading for reading's sake. So it's a key time right now for us to really reinforce that. And if you were at the family engagement night, you know, we had some reading activities there, some math activities there, and that was really well attended, and there were some reinforced things that you could do at home as well.
Someone mentioned to me this week, every couple of years I forget this and somebody reminds me, what grade is it in high school where we do the collaborative math? It was only the complaint that, oh, it's a group and you don't get your own score, you get your group score or something. I just can't remember.
There are team tests.
Team tests.
Yeah.
So what percentage of your grade is the team test?
I don't know that off the
Roughly.
top of my
Is
head.
it like low or is it high?
It's 10% of their grade. The students are also asked, and I know this is true for the high school, the students are asked if they want to take that team test individually, they have that option to do so.
What did you say, what grade was it, Clint? I'm sorry.
Well, I'm speaking for 8 through 12.
Oh, so the team test is an option in every grade.
The team tests are options in the CPM curriculum.
So we do CPM in every grade. So algebra.
6 through 12.
6 through.
Yep. And so they do have an option to take the team test individually, but they can't flip flop back and forth. Like if they get halfway through the test, they're like, I want to go back to the team test. And the way the teachers score them at the high school is that in a group of 4, they'll take. In a group of 4, they'll take student A's test and they'll score page 1, and student B's test and they'll score page 2. Student C's test, they'll score 3. Student D's test and score page 4. And that in completion will be a test. And in theory, their whole team should have the same test. And so that accounts for 10% of their grade at the high school,
Homework is 10%, learning target quizzes are 30, and chapter tests are 50%.
So are all of those like the assignments, and is it all team sort of? So the smartest kid, you're sort of essentially copying his paper.
Well,
You want to be in
if
their
you're
group,
smart enough to at least copy it.
the smartest kid.
That's only 10% of their grade, JD.
But the rest, the quizzes and the rest is not.
No. That's all individual.
It's just, we hear parents complain about this, every so often, and we always say, is that one in our curriculum cycle, Amy, or no? Because the math now is.
Yeah, we'll be bringing more specifics on the curriculum review cycle to you in a couple months when we have more comprehensive data, but I think we're getting a little bit off track here because this isn't a conversation about our resources at this point. We're trying to target our data. And just in follow-up though, I want to reiterate what Dr. Sprague said at the last meeting, and you heard it earlier from Donna when she was sharing about elementary. It's not about the resource that you choose, it's more about the practices that you're using when you are using that resource. So whatever we select, which is also a process, there's room for improvement with everything, and it's you as the teacher and how we support the teacher in implementing those things that really make it shine. So, and I just also want to re-acknowledge, like, some of these processes have not been in place in our district, these conversations, and I hear a lot of shifts in the right direction when we're focusing on using the data, adjusting our instruction in real time, making decisions to be reflective of what we're seeing from our students. Those conversations are crucial in continuing to move the needle, and our teachers are taking that challenge and with the leadership that they have, making some improvements. So we can't do it all at once, but yes, we will bring not only math, but ELA and every other content area in a rotation that we hope to fulfill for years beyond just the immediate today.
Right. I'm just torn on that because I know it'd be nice to ask your friend, just to learn math. If you're stuck and you can't get it, then you can talk about it. But if you're, it's just a weird.
To not get sidetracked, but Clint, you just shared it's the student's option to take the team test individually. Okay. I don't know that that's common knowledge, so I just wanted to make sure I heard it correctly too.
Is it in the syllabus?
Ask a high schooler about syllabus, they'll look at you like, what?
Yeah, I haven't checked the syllabus, that came from a teacher.
I know the team tests are part of the curriculum. I discussed it with Clint last week. I really have a problem. I understand the concept of having a group of 4 work together to try to improve the math skills of the group and to do well as a test. I cannot wrap my head around the fact that one kid in that group might have scored a 92 if their test was done graded by itself, all 4 pages. And another kid might have got a 73, and another one got a 52, and another one got an 18. And then the math teacher looks at these pages indiscriminately, picks one, looks at that, scores it, looks at another, scores that of page 2, takes another kid, scores that, and then does page 4, adds them together. And now, as a parent, I'm sitting here, although I'm a parent of people who graduated a long time ago, but if my kid truly got a 96 on this team test, if his or her 4 pages were scored, and she got a 35 because it so happened that the other 3 pages were basically blank on the other 3,
Right.
that's not fair.
Right.
And so I really believe that these team tests should be done as team tests, but they should be graded individually so that the kid that deserves the A gets the A and doesn't get a 75 or a 46 for the group because the group messed up because 3 of them couldn't do the math or chose not to show their work, which I know as math teachers you have to show your work or you get downgraded there. But I really struggle with this, that we're doing this from 6th grade all the way through 12, and our best and brightest are getting a score for the sake of equity.
Right, they've been doing this since I've been on the board a long
That's-
time.
that's
But, you know,
fine, but it's
but
not
that's
right.
still, yeah,
It's not
it's
right.
hard because the grades matter a lot to getting into college. And if you all of a sudden don't get an A or an A plus and you need it for your class rank, rough.
So I think you bring up a good point, and part of reviewing not only what are we deeming as the essential standards, but then how are we reviewing our resources, what are the gaps we have in that. Part of that is talking through our grading practices and systems as well. So this is a good conversation, and thank you for bringing it up, and it causes some reflection, not only for our teachers, but how we help our teachers evolve, maybe possibly away from the training that they received to implement the resource. But that's a conversation that we have to have, and it can't be solved here in this moment. But thank you for your feedback, and we'll consider that. But it's all part of the package when you review your curriculum and keep that going as part of your system in your district.
Does anybody else have anything reasonably related to our mid-year data? Okay, let's move on to board action item A. Consideration to approve 2022-2024 Anigo Dugout Club Agreement.
I move the board approve the 2022 to 2024 Anigo Dugout Club Agreement as presented.
I'll second that.
We talked about this a lot at Committee of the Whole. Anybody have anything, or should we vote? Okay, all in favor, say
Aye.
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 All right, motion carries. Item B, consideration to approve partnership agreement with Anigo Child Care Center.
I move the board approve a Tier 1 partnership agreement with Anigo Child Care Center for the 2022-23 school year in the amount of $60,000.
I'll second it.
Discussion?
Gabby's here tonight. Gabby, I'm wondering if you could share. So I've gotten feedback, and I think it's very valid. I think that this is a great opportunity for our district and our community. I also very much see the opposition to this opportunity in terms of taxpayers' dollars going to support a private entity and limited people being impacted by this. So Tier 1 is 10 spots. So from a taxpayer perspective, that could be a pretty significant, that is a pretty significant investment in just 10 spots. So can you share a little bit on that? I know we touched on it last time, but is that number only 10? How does that, what does that look like on paper versus how it plays out? If you could share a little bit.
All right, so it was brought up the last time. So if we fill the 10 spots, what if there are 12 Anigo School District employees that have children at the Child Care Center? And within the contract that I'm writing, any Anigo School District employee would receive the discount. So you could have 15, you could have 17 of the spots at the Child Care Center, and those employees would receive the same discount, even though the funding wouldn't change or increase. Part of the partnership plan was that as an educator myself and having children in child care, you get a certain amount of vacation days. So as educators, and we have summers off, we have spring break, we have winter break. In the daycare world, that doesn't necessarily happen. So you are paying whether your child attends childcare or not, because that spot is there. Part of the contract is that part of this money would be going to supplement teachers who would pull their children during these breaks. So on average, say $170 a week per child. If you filled all 10 spots, that's $180 per week for the school district. So let's say, as a teacher, I know we work during the summer, so let's say 8 weeks on average in the summer out of the 11, 12, plus spring break and winter break would put you at 10 weeks. So on the middle end, that'd be $6,800 that would be lost. That the staff would have to be paying for even if they weren't bringing their children to the child care center, which is a perk of the partnership for the school district. If we're on the higher end, that's almost $10,000, just for some number wise. I heard Amy talking about how important the early childhood skills are to children. I have young children, 4K, 3-year-olds, knowing these skills coming in to their learning experiences can start at the level at the child care center. We are going to be a play-based program with curriculums set in place, so these kids are coming recognizing numbers, recognizing shapes, knowing how to write their name, things like that, which would benefit the achievement of the school district. Also, that amount of money is getting you the premium spot. Say you hire a new staff, you could wait 2 years to get a spot at a daycare center, but the partnership puts you at the top priority of receiving the next available spot. So say there's 25 people on the wait list, the school district gets a new employee, they go all the way to the top of the waiting list, and that alone is pretty priceless. Let's see, what are some other points I had written down? ESSER dollars. Not sure how your funding is going to work, but ESSER dollars alone, according to online, the school district received almost $5 million in ESSER dollars. And part of that is to retain and attract staff, and that could be a part of this partnership stipend funding.
Gabby, if I may, I'm glad you
Sure.
said that, because if we were sitting here without that money to look at retention and recruitment, I would not be comfortable, and Tim, I'll speak for you as well, asking the board to consider general fund, for example. It simply would not be in the cards. But when you have staff members who lost their daycare, and then we in turn share their stress because we're worried about them fulfilling their jobs and coming back, and then that money can be used for retention and recruitment. That's why Gabby is here tonight. But
Right, just to make it clear, this funding is not coming from the general funding. It is a special government funding program for staff retention.
One other point is that we might do tier 1 for a year or two and then cut back to a tier 2 or 3, but this is generally subsidizing daycare for every kid who will be in that building, not just for the Antigo School staff. And so when there's a general daycare shortage, that's kind of where we're stepping in to help her get started and, stay in business. It's hard to attract people and pay them. The only other daycare still in business in town has Covantage and Hospital subsidizing them. So I don't know, maybe from that point of view, it's needed.
Right, it's to sustain the child care center as a community amenity, to have quality child care. And so the money that's being stipend and funded is going right back into the children of the community for any member that attends the child care center.
It's a tough spot because it's a reasonable argument to say that it's not our district's role. And I think that's a fair argument. I am in a position where I have young kids and I was a daycare mom. So I understand the benefits, significant benefits of the prioritizing on the wait list of a discount of vacation days you're not having to pay. The flip side is I also very much understand the flip side of it. So I'm truly curious on if anybody else has had any feedback from staff, from the community on this.
Nobody contacted me. We got that one email in favor. No one contacts me that much. I'm complaining about that.
Julie, can you remind, what's the number of staff members or at this number of children that could utilize spots? Was it 6 or 7?
For a tier 3 partner is 6, tier 2 8, and tier 1 10.
When you surveyed our staff?
Oh, there were 7 at first run through, 7 who said they were interested. So by no means committing, but Gabby knows that. And then I reached out a second time, not to the entire staff, and just said, you know, if you are interested, express your opinion, that there would be a board vote tonight, and we're still at 7. I did not gain any additional interest with that second email, and Gabby knows that too.
So tier 3 is 6 spots, not ideal in terms of total number, but it also makes more sense potentially with the number in our staff survey.
You also want to think about if you're hiring any new staff, you'd be filling all of your spots with current staff. You wouldn't have any availability for any new staff that would be hired for next year.
Gabby, there's, I had a mom come up to me and asked me, so I'm expressing what her question was. So, in all 3 tiers, would that mean that our school district would have top priority?
Yes.
Okay. So, as I did the math based on what the question was from the mom, was for 10 spots, you're asking the school district to pay $60,000, which is $6,000 per spot. In tier 2, 8 spots for $45,000 is $5,625 per spot. And at tier 3, where it's 6 spots, it's $30,000, which is $5,000 a spot. So my question is, why, if we go tier 1, are we paying $6,000 a spot, and if we do tier 2, we're paying $56.25, and if we do tier 3, we're paying $5,000. So the question was basically, why would we take a higher number of spots to pay more money per spot? So that was the question from the mom.
Sure. So it's the premium spot. So if you would be a tier 2 partnership, then potentially you'd have to wait a year and a half to have a spot open if tier 1 continues to fill first. So you're paying for your premium spot, and they are also getting a larger discount.
Right, so if all comes in, there's been some talk of that, takes tier 1, then we lose that. Yeah, then did you do the math, Dave, adjusting for the 8% to the 10%?
No, I just looked at what the cost was for the spots.
Right, that's
so
fair.
you know, $60,000 for 10 spots is $6,000
right.
per. And so it was going down, and normally you tend to get the bigger break the more spots you take rather than the least. So that was the question from the mom. So
Gabby, if you had
That's why I
more
brought
than one partner per tier, you would accept multiple partners at each tier?
No, the reason we had to have the tiered system is because then you wouldn't have that premium priority. So if I had 2 top tier spots, how would you decide who fills the baby spot at 6 months first?
Got it. And that's what you alluded to when the board wanted to vote tonight, because my understanding is we are the first partner then to make a decision.
Yes,
Is
I'm
that
meeting
right?
with my next partnership plan next week.
Okay, thank you.
Curiosity question with that. Do you know how LaRoyer did that with Aspirus and Covantage then? Does Aspirus have top priority and Covantage has secondary? Got it.
So they do have discounted rates. So Aspirus employees receive the most discount on their child care. Covantage employees receive a slightly lower, and then community members pay the most, which is how it would also work with this partnership.
So Tim, okay. I saw your writing, so, so what I hear is we're gonna use ESSER funds.
That would be the plan, Dan.
Okay. How many more years do we have ESSER plans? Funds, 2 years? Do they spread out beyond 2 years?
Yeah.
Can we take some of the ESSER money that was funded this year and then next year, and then at some point in year 3, I think it is, we hit the 5,000. Can we spread it out beyond those years? Because here's my point. If we only have ESSER funds for this coming year and next year, or ESSER funds for this year, next year, and the third year out, which is what I think it is, and you're nodding. Okay. So, sorry, Gabby.
Yes.
So, my problem was also that we're at some point possibly looking at taking money from Fund 10, especially when Tim's forecast. And so now we know, okay, and I did not know before tonight that we could use ESSER funds. And the idea that we can use ESSER funds for 3 years is much more palatable for me than using Fund 10 money. Because I would have voted no using Fund 10 money. However, this board and any future board members need to understand that in year 4, going forward, next school year being year 1, we have ESSER funds for, Tim, 3 years, okay? So in year 4, we will not have ESSER funds, and then we have to, then this board, or future board actually, will have to come up with a plan depending on if we're gonna go to Fund 10 or we're gonna drop out. So we just need to know that going forward.
Dave, if I could just make a comment. I think, and Amy can correct me, I think we're looking at this year and 2 additional years. So,
Yeah, we're looking at 22-23 school year.
Amy, do you have that off the top of your head?
I thought ESSER funds had to be used before 2024.
So regardless, I think it's this year and 2 additional years is what the performance is for ESSER 3. We, I think when we started talking about this, we were looking at recruitment as a tool. Title II, and you know, Amy's going to cringe that I suggest this, is directly related to professional development, recruitment, and retention. And so that would be a vehicle that we could use as we look forward to compete, because it's going to get tougher and tougher to recruit teachers. And whether we use Title II for PD or we use it for recruitment and retention will be something Amy, as the grant manager, has to weigh with Julie and the board.
Because we're only signing a 1-year contract right now today, correct?
Correct. So on the contract I've started to design, I did share it with Julie. It does state on there that it is for 1 year. So whatever date we decide to start, there's a spot where our contract becomes renewable or editable. And then when the new contract would take place. So you could change tiers, you could change the number of spots. And as you mentioned, this is to help it get started, to sustain it. There's, from what I've received feedback-wise, the amount of people who are needing childcare in our area is much larger than I'm going to be able to hold capacity. So in my future plans, being able to have a secondary location, these funds would be able to begin that, and that's not necessarily saying that eventually over time, we relook at the pricing of the partnership plan.
When you're rich.
So Tim,
Oh, yeah.
Tim, you're basically saying 60,000 out of this year's ESSER funds, and then, because you're trying to get it started.
So Dave, we have ESSER 2 that's going for this year and next year. ESSER 3, we haven't even gotten the budget set together yet because DPI is still, Amy and I are still working on the requirements of the application. And then it's 2 additional years after that.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody got anything else they want to say?
I do. Janie, like Dave, I was really torn between both of these, going back and forth because of hearing from various people in the community. Gabby, I believe that the Antigo Child Care Center is going to grow and blossom and be a great place for kids to go. However, I didn't realize that we could use the ESSER funds either, and I honestly came tonight prepared no against this because when I look at what Tim projected to us for next year, we're at an $812,000 deficit. So we're not balancing the budget. So we already are looking at an unbalanced budget. We're going to add another $60,000 to it. But that we can use ESSER fund money, I'm good with that. I can say yes because I know this will benefit teacher retention. And that's what I said in the meeting 2 weeks ago, that this would benefit, and I can get behind that and support that. But if our ESSER funds, Tim, have to be used by 2024, you're saying there could be other places that we can look at to fund this particular benefit for teachers. Is that what I heard you say, or was I, because I was trying to write something down at the same time.
Yeah, and I think it's hard to predict what's going to happen 3 years out, but we need to be, knowing that the pipeline for new teachers is going to be restricted, Antigo is going to need to compete for every other district. And this is going to be one tool in our toolbox to help recruit teachers when we need them.
And so Title II money, did you say? Is it not?
Well, that's something between Julie and Amy to decide, because as we tighten the budget, we will also be looking at, how do we take these new teachers and train them and use Title II dollars to do that. So it'll be a balancing act between all of it.
Because if you go on out your further, your future predictions, and those are predictions, all those can change. We all know that. Fiscal year 25, we're actually $40,000 in the black. Fiscal year 26, $270,000 in the red. So I would like to offer an amendment to this motion. And my amendment would start at the conclusion of the $60,000. The amendment would be these funds to be allocated from ESSER funds, period. Before Fund 10 is to be used, this project must be brought back to the board for a vote. Second. And what that does, that just clarifies. It doesn't muddy the water. It just clarifies, Gabby, that we know we're on a year-to-year contract, but this actually puts in writing and gives the directive to our administration that when we get beyond ESSER fund money, and then if we use other monies, because I didn't include the what was the other fund that Title II. I didn't include the Title II. I'm just concerned about the Fund 10 for the simple fact I want to be a good steward as a board member to all of our taxpayers. And what I heard the most was, I cannot understand how, if our school is going to be going into the deficit, how we can add $60,000 to it. I think 2 weeks ago I was behind. If we would have voted 2 weeks ago, I would have said, yes, let's go, without even thinking about this. But then whenever I thought about it and then got to listening to people, and then I heard that ESSER funds could be used, this really makes me excited. And, because it's gonna be an asset to our district. Number one, it's gonna be an asset to our community. That's the big thing. And, then it's gonna be an asset to our district. As long as you've got Angie shaking her head behind you, it's gonna be successful.
And I just wanted to add, my children will be coming to the Antigo School District. So me pulling out of Fund 10 would be one of the last things I would want to do.
If the money's in Fund 10, by all means, if we can put it in the budget, let's do it. Let's be creative and make it happen. But just to add that additional to what's already projected to be in the red, I just can't wrap my mind around it. But if there's funds, and Tim knows where to get money from different funds, and if there's a way to get those funds, let's go.
I just want to have our board caution getting too far out. Those projections are based on $0 from the state for the next 4 or 5 years, and we know that's not likely to happen.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Right, because I would think we'd probably talk about this at board level every year anyways.
We would.
Oh, I'm
So
sure
I don't
we
have a
will.
problem with I guess, so should we just vote on allowing the motion to be amended?
No, there was a second, so now we're voting on the amendment.
On the
Yes,
amendment.
yes.
And again, the purpose of it is just to bring clarity, to have it in writing, in our minutes, that before Fund 10 is touched for this wonderful project, that we come back and talk about this and discuss it. Because maybe if we do have to touch Fund 10, we can be creative in how we can touch and use the taxpayers' money in order to show this as a benefit. And that's what I sold to some of the parents that came to me was, why do they get the benefit? And I said, well, it's teacher retention all across the state, across the nation. Schools are having a hard time with teacher retention, not just public schools, private schools as well too. There's just not a huge pool of teachers out there for any school, private or public. So I tried to tell them that this would be a benefit for us to retain and also attract some younger families to our district. And but it was just, the question kept coming up, why continue to add to the red? I hope I'm really sounding okay with that, because I'm behind you, supporting you. I wish I had a baby. I would send my baby there, but my baby's a junior in high school and there's no more coming.
They can come work for me.
Grandkids someday.
Oh, Lord.
A roll call vote
on the amendment.
Mary Kay, would you read what's happening here? Please, thank you.
The main motion was, I move the board approve a Tier 1 partnership agreement with the Antigo Child Care Center for the 22-23 school year in the amount of $60,000, with the amendment to add these funds to be allocated from ESSER funds before Fund 10 is to be used. This must be brought back for vote.
Thank you.
Deep?
Yes.
Gaken?
Yes.
Maddox Nelson?
Yes.
Neufeld?
Yes.
Hyatt?
Yes.
Bardo?
Yes.
Schrader?
Yes.
Amendment
Am I
passed.
supposed to say motion passes? Is that what you do? Does?
Now we go back to vote on the entire motion as amended.
Yes, okay, let's go back and vote on the motion as amended.
Gagnon?
Yes.
Maddox Nelson?
Yes.
Neufeld?
Yes.
Hyatt?
Yes.
Bardo?
Yes.
Deep?
Yes.
Schrader?
Yes. Motion passes, yeah, thanks. Okay.
Thank you.
JD, I have one question. On that last item number A, I didn't jump in quick enough. That had to deal with money. So we need to do a roll call.
Okay.
I'm sorry
And
to
I
cause
missed it
confusion.
too, JD.
Sorry, but I thought he was just starting something new. If nobody asked for it, the voice vote can.
Nobody
If they ask for a roll
$1,200.
call, yeah.
Yeah.
You want to, I mean, okay, we can go back and we can do our roll call.
What's this, the duck?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Matic Nelson,
Yes.
Newfeld,
Yes.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Bardo,
Yes.
Deep,
Yes.
Gagnon,
Yes.
and Schrader.
Yes. Thank you, Danny. Okay, so we passed that again. Let's go to C, consideration to approve student fee schedule.
I move the board approve the amended student fees schedule as presented.
Second.
Okay, so we are revisiting this obviously from Committee of the Whole. Just a reminder that the first attachment there, we'll talk about admissions right after this agenda item, but we did take in revenue over $71,000. So, but we in general agree with the board that we didn't want to overtax our families. We wanted to be more intentional about fees. So if you look at the second attachment then, what we currently have is at the top, and then right below that, the red you'll see is the recommended elimination of all user fees across the board. And then the yellow, we capped athletics at $100, which is a reduced rate, and did away with middle school athletic costs altogether. Some really good points made by our coaches and staff that said, if we want to grow athletic programs, we shouldn't be charging at the middle level. Let's have them explore and hopefully stick with it then. The locks will remain the same, and then course fees at the board's suggestion all were either eliminated or reduced across the board, and we would cap them at $40 per semester. That's going to be a little bit of a bookkeeping issue because Infinite Campus Mass assigns these fees at registration, but Janet Krivershine assures me she can figure it out because it'll benefit the kids. So those are the recommendations for fees.
I want to thank anybody who worked on this because this is exactly what we asked for, was a reduction. And I think it'll be a good thing for the parents of the district. Putting the work in on this.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Ditto.
Anyone got anything else, or should we do our roll call vote? Okay, let's roll call. I got, this one's more obvious.
Newfeld,
Yes.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Bardo,
Yes.
Deep,
Yes.
Gagnon,
Yes.
Matic Nelson,
Yes.
Schrader.
Yes. Okay, let's go on to item D, consideration to approve admissions proposal.
I move the board approve the change to district events admissions as presented.
Second that.
Okay, here you see Tom Schofield had already done some homework with the link at the top of this attachment by surveying what other school districts were doing. And to streamline, we took the board's suggestion and really Tom and other people's suggestion to eliminate student admission fees as long as they have an ID. And interestingly enough, that's for the opposing team's students as well. And then we also took a look at family passes, so you'll see some creative bargains there. And then what I would say Tom is most excited about, and Mary Kay and I had to ask his definition of a senior when this came out, but is the concept of a gold card. And it just had more of a ring to it than a maroon card, but basically we would offer then free admissions at most district events for any senior citizen who comes in and is interested in that type of pass. We think it would be great to promote Antigo Pride that way. And also to answer the board's question about the musical, et cetera, that's right, they have a tiered cost, but we cannot offer passes because they have to pay, as you know, for the rights to that musical, et cetera. And that really is their method to recoup some of the cost for that production. So that's why we have that clarification at the bottom.
And the musical is The Little Mermaid.
Mm-hmm.
Nathaniel's Flounder.
I'll have to take my 3-year-old, she'll be dying to see that.
The question I think came up at the committee of the whole meeting was what about the elementary students? Because they don't carry their...
They do have IDs, so we would love to get them and whoever accompanies them in the habit of showing that, yeah.
Sure. I think it's a great plan.
Okay, well, let's do roll call vote.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Barba,
Yes.
Deep,
Yes.
Gagnon,
Yes.
Maddox Nelson,
Yes.
Newfeld,
Yes.
Schrader.
Yes. Okay, motion carries. Item E, consideration to approve curricular rate and internal sub-increase option.
I move the board approve the curricular rate and internal sub increase to $20 an hour or an additional hour of sick leave, the staff choice.
Second.
Do I get to pick who then officially was the second?
Yeah.
Picked Mary, okay. Okay, thing, comment on this?
I don't have it.
Okay, did you go, I can't remember, did you go back and ask, somebody suggested to you last time to add the additional hour for the sick leave?
Yes, it was a high school teacher, Amber Domitz, and especially with the rampant illness and teachers who have, or I should say certified staff who have young families, that sick leave for some has been depleted. And so she made the case, we vetted it with payroll and the business office, and we can make it work because in this case then an hour of sick leave is more valuable than giving up your prep for what used to be $16 an hour. So, and we are proud to make it the staff choice so that they can, you know, choose what benefits them the most.
Anybody got anything else, or should we?
Julie, did we ever, or am I dreaming that this happened, where if I'm out of sick leave, or if Mary's out of sick leave, then for an emergency case like that, I could donate, or she could donate sick leave from her bank to that employee? Did we ever do that, or?
We do have a sick leave bank, but it's very structured and for very significant circumstances. So to be out of sick leave and be healthy would not automatically grant someone access to that bank.
Is that a policy that we have that we could look at to change? You know, because we're requiring those teachers to be off because of a sick kid for quarantine or
Danny,
any other thing. Help me, Mary.
I think you're referring to what was established back in, I want to say, the 70s.
Wow, I
Would be, I'm not sure.
And it was the sick bank, and when you got to your limited number of days, you know, like I had 120 days, and every year you got 10 more, but you couldn't keep the 10. So if you didn't specify that you wanted him to go into the sick bank, they just kind of they disappeared. So every year I gave 10 days to the sick bank, but then as time went on, and when it was established, I'm almost positive for a teacher. He was an elementary teacher with a terminal illness. And it was designated, I believe, for catastrophic to situations to the employee, not to a spouse or a child. And then along the way, FMLA came in, and then that kind of took over then for a spouse or a child or a parent. But then what was happening was people were borrowing for maternity leave. And the idea was if you did borrow, eventually you did it with the idea that, you know, as you accumulated your sick day, you were going to pay back. It was kind of a payback situation. Well, that really wouldn't work if it was being used for what it was supposed to be used for. But then suddenly people were using it for maternity leave and different, it was being abused. And we had a staff member who had like 3 kids in 4 years, and she was taking this extra time and taking these days, and you know, nothing was being paid back. And then I thought it was completely eliminated, and then I retired. And so I don't know what, you know, I don't know, but that was the whole idea behind the sick bank. It was catastrophic to the employee.
That still stands.
Yeah, yeah, because now there's FMLA, which covers everything else.
Well, that just holds your position, that doesn't pay you.
Right, right.
So it is a policy or it's not a policy?
I would have to check is it in the handbook, Tim?
Page 17.
Oh.
Something negotiated.
Because you
I
memorized
do
it?
remember you, Mary, telling that story.
Yeah.
It it all came back to me.
And it was a great thing, and you know,
But it
that
got
was
abused.
also back when you were able to accumulate 120 days. I believe you can't do that anymore, correct?
I would
90?
have to check.
I think it's
what we go
90
up
days
to.
now or something. I
What
don't
page
think,
is that?
I don't know what it is, but you know, it was really a good thing.
So Mary, your story is correct. We had that in place. We disbanded that. And then I think it was just prior to Julie being hired, we established a new sick leave bank policy for employee catastrophic illness.
And it's a great thing to, you know, and I remember too, there were times where one of the teachers in our building, her husband had terminal cancer, and that was prior to FMLA, and I don't remember what the deal was with the sick bank, but we were able to call payroll, and I could have said, I'd like to give 10 days of my accumulated sick days to this employee, you know, without the expectation of it ever being paid back. It was just kind of a goodwill gesture, and of course that was all back when, you know, we had the unions and, you know, different things, and you just did those kind of things for your
Absolutely.
coworkers.
So Mary, without getting too detailed, we took the popularity out of it, where you have to be willing to donate up to 2 days. And essentially it's within the first month of the school year. To be eligible to draw out of it, you have to be willing to put in on the front end.
That's great. It's a great thing to have.
Forgive me, Tim, for not remembering that, but as you were saying it, I remember that conversation and how we changed that from what it had been to what it currently is.
Any other comments? Okay, let's have a roll call vote.
Bardo,
Yes.
Deep,
Yes.
Gagnon,
Yes.
Maddox Nelson,
Yes.
Newfeld,
Yes.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Schrader.
Yes. Do you guys want to take a quick 2-minute bathroom break before we? 5 minutes? Okay, let's take a 5-minute break. The rest of this might take a little bit.
Shitty.
See?
In
They
fact,
agree
I
with
thought
me.
that Dugout Club one too, but we moved on, and I pulled it up quick and I glanced for it, and I didn't see it, because I didn't. I thought there was.
It was not in the motion, so it was more tricky. I wasn't paying
Correct, which
attention.
is why I also had to come back away. So it got me too. But now, you're always gonna be super hyper vigilant to it. And it was only $1,200.
Let's talk about item F, consideration to approve 2022-2023 district calendar.
I move the board approve the 2022-2023 district calendar as presented.
Second.
Okay, I did what the board asked, and you'll see in the first attachment, I compared the last school year with this school year and next. So you can see at the top from DPI how the minutes are calculated, and also the numbers of instruction, hours of instruction. I said minutes, sorry. So anyway, it is true that by adding the Wednesday release, we are losing instructional hours at the first elementary and middle school level, and then gaining hours at the high school level. The important factor, which I know I said, but just to remind you, that we took away 5 professional development days. We just believe that this strategy, while still putting us far over DPI's required minutes, is one that we're excited to try to improve student achievement. Further down, you'll see that I neglected to tell you last time too. We're also looking at adding 17 minutes to the high school day, and that was in the works even before this Schedule 2 or this calendar draft, because the 42-minute cycle, or 45 at the high school, felt a little rushed. So 17 isn't, you know, a significant change, but we think we can reroute the buses. We have big plans for this and make everything more streamlined. Elementary, we're steadfast. They said do not add minutes. We are good with our number of minutes for those youngest learners. And I just feel so strongly, like the board does, about wanting to improve student achievement. I hesitate to present you a calendar that is the same as it has been the last several years. It's time to try what research shows us and see how it works, and so I'm excited to present this draft to you.
You know, when you were just talking about for the next school year, the start and end times of the day, obviously you mentioned the bus schedule will have to be changed, because I go to the middle school and a couple days a week and pick up, but if the high school, because the girls come on the transfer bus, but if they're still isn't the high school done before the middle school right now, right?
Yes.
So then they'll do something different.
Right.
And you know, I really had and I mentioned last time, I really had a hard time looking at the calendar and seeing those Wednesdays, you know, that whole blocked out. But I guess after I thought about it, after it was brought up that there would be options for in school for the kids to be able to stay there, because I know when we went to the 4-day week, I heard a lot, not from parents, I heard from employers that were mad about Fridays, and it had to be a Friday, and nobody could work on Fridays, they didn't have anywhere to send their kids. But I think that, and I also like the idea of, you know, they would have an option, you know, if something came up, they could stay till the end of the day. And I also like the options that if the IAs or, you know, the support staff people would have an opportunity to get their hours in.
Yes.
And I think that's important too. So I guess, you know, it is something you can, you know, that can be tried and see how it works. So.
Julie, what is that hour gonna look like if you have 50 kids and we just gonna put them in the gymnasium, or can you describe because I know an hour is a long time for some kids.
Right, so smaller groups the better, and I think options would also be important. I believe some families will choose to have that hour with their children at home, but we don't want to mandate that and inconvenience anyone. So options will be key depending upon grade level. So there could be physical activity. We plan to partner again with the Boys and Girls Club so that we can have buses take kids directly there. Smaller intentional groups so that kids and families are really selecting ahead of time what they would be interested in. Because the worst idea, I agree with you, Danny, would be a study hall. They don't work now, much less everyone together at the end of the day.
The other thing that I wanted to question about the calendar for next year is the virtual days versus the snow days. Because I hear from a number of families, most of them are mainly rural families that have internet problems and the list goes on and on, that have said that whenever there's virtual days, they don't tell their kids to do anything. Or, if it's a snow day, they don't tell their kids to do anything. So I would like to see if it's possible for us to, because I looked at a couple other schools that do this, they have in their minutes for the school year where they can accommodate 2 or 3, I don't think I found any over 3, snow days. But then if their district had more snow days that they had to close school, then they would automatically revert to virtual learning days, so as to not add minutes or days to the end of the school year. Did the team look at that?
So the board approved that either last year or
Last
the
year it
year
was, yeah.
before, because we can count that now, and it's not, I don't want anyone to misunderstand that it's 8 hours of a child in front of a computer. The teacher can have learning objectives uploaded prior to, and then any time after 9 o'clock, a student can log in, look at those learning objectives, complete, and we can count that as minutes of instruction. That's why we don't add on snow days.
Okay.
And this year we haven't had any, knock on wood. Today was a tough decision, but I think we made the right one. So we don't add them in anymore because we can count them.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. So the student is not all day on the computer.
Not at all.
What would you say is an average length that they're on the computer doing the schoolwork? Hours?
I think
2 hours?
it depends on the age, Danny. For the young ones, we know that the teachers will have read-alouds uploaded and things, and it'll be, maybe an hour max, and probably not at all one sitting. And then, depending upon a high schooler schedule, like for auto classes, it's really tough to upload a virtual lesson, but teachers do their best, so I guess it just depends. Couple hours probably at the high end.
I struggle with the virtual snow days. We all survived shutdowns and close contact quarantines countless times, and from a parent perspective, I want a snow day. I think that's routinely been shared with me from parents, is just give our kids a snow day. It's not equitable to have some on, some off. What's the ramifications if you can't or refuse to attend versus attending, and just simply the amount of juggling to find out a child care provider who has access and knowledge to navigate the virtual for 1 hour a day can cause way more stress than what it's worth, so some will simply say no. And so I think my feeling is I would love to just see snow days. And I've heard a lot of feedback on that. I wasn't even thinking about that one until you brought that up, specific to the calendar.
How do you feel about the learning loss trade-off there on that, Jill? Because Because I feel for, I loved snow days when I was a kid. I always wanted to snow. You didn't do a school, you got the day off. It was a treat.
Well, I look at it from a perspective of our district isn't all going on and not everybody's accessing it. So there's going to be learning lost regardless of if it's a virtual snow day or a snow day. And so that's my initial thought on that. It's weather related, right? So it's not like we're intentionally taking away time. It's safety focused, which would be the decision making on it, as opposed to like just no school for no reason.
And I wasn't really prepared for this discussion tonight, but I can tell you that some districts call it learning opportunities. So that if the opportunity is there for a healthy academic engagement, that we should offer those. But then it's not a make or break a grade kind of thing for a high school student, for example, and that you can count minutes, because I think there was one year, my first year here, I want to say we had 8 or 11, stick in my head, snow days. It was 8. That was awful. And our primary kids, the teachers were beside themselves, and so we were trying to do some of that anyway. I think it's about balance, Jill. I love snow days too, and I do think it's about balance where we can't mandate, certainly, but if the opportunity is there to continue learning on a reasonable schedule, I wouldn't want to not put that out there as well. So just a thought.
I did pay attention this morning in the school closures, and I wanted to go back in. I didn't get a chance to, but the vast majority of districts that closed, very, very few had virtual learning days in place of it. I found that interesting because I do think that seemed more of a push last year. I have no data to support this. Observationally, it appears that has diminished and more going back to the traditional snow day. Nothing to justify that statement, just observations.
Well, and you're right, it works best if we can confidently predict a snow day, and then we send devices home with every child. Last year we ended up calling one a snow day instead of remote learning because not everyone had a device home. And so we do juggle with that a little bit too, and because we want to do what's best and reasonable.
Yeah, and devices are one thing, and the other thing that I am very familiar with is the caregivers that are watching the kids. It's not necessarily just about devices or service. It's about the grandparent or somebody that's more removed from what we're used to, navigating username, passwords, logging on, clicking links for their first graders. So those are the things, and I would say more the younger level. And I'm just sharing feedback. I wasn't prepared either to have this discussion, so.
I'm sorry.
If I could just add, in the calendar that you built to kind of address Danny's concern, if you look at the additional hours that's in there over the requirement, we've got 6 or 7 snow days built into the calendar.
That's what I was just looking at while I was listening to the discussion too. So we could potentially have 2 or 3 snow days, identified snow days, and then beyond that go to the...
Yeah. We always, the last several years, I checked when I first started in this role, I wanted to look at many years prior calendars so I understood Antigo's systems and thinking behind them, and only now our offering changes.
Okay, so let's have a roll call vote.
Dee,
Yes.
Gagnon,
Yes.
Maddox Nelson,
No.
Newfeld,
Yes.
Hyatt,
No.
Bartle,
No.
Schrader,
Yes. Did you count? Is it
4-3.
4-3? Motion passes.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item G, report of employee resignations and retirements.
I move the board
accept the resignation of Angel Zimmerman, Board of Education Clerk, and Lisa Penting, Middle School Instruction Assistant.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. It's sad to see Angel go. She was a good asset for the board with Visser. I tried to tell her today that she could undo her resignation, but she didn't like that idea. Okay, let's move on to item H. Somebody to be the board clerk.
So you're opening the floor for nominations?
Yes.
I'd like to nominate Dr. Dave Bardo for the board clerk.
Can I second things? Or no?
Nominations don't need a second.
Oh, okay. Any other nominations?
Do that 2 more times and you'll be good.
Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Okay. Can I?
Nominations are now closed.
Do we cast an unanimous ballot? Do you do that or do I do that? Do you say the cast an unanimous ballot or do I do that?
You can.
No, you can do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I just said that.
Okay, well then let's
Close
do that.
nominations and elect him by acclamation.
Okay. All in favor say aye. Aye. Yeah. Congratulations, Dave. I see you didn't decline that, so.
But I didn't say aye either.
Okay, let's move on to board vacancy discussion and possible action.
I guess we'll probably have to do it like we did last time. You probably need to call for nominations from the community. You probably need to have a deadline. I don't know, when is our next meeting on
The
the 8th?
8th of March will be our committee of the whole.
How many weeks did we get the last time here, Kate?
It was about the same
It
thing.
was the same.
We would have the,
2 weeks that we gave them.
right,
Friday before was what we,
we'd have the applications due to me, right, or due to the central office by
Friday, 1 o'clock.
Friday at noon.
And then have interviews right at the
At the committee of the whole.
And then, that
but they'll be seated at the next.
next board meeting, correct?
Or is there an option of, with the timing, to just proceed as we are?
No, you
Our
have,
policy.
if you look at the policy, if anybody resigns before the second Tuesday in October, then that position would be filled or could be left until the next spring meeting. But if it is after the second Tuesday in October, I believe that they would be appointed by the other board members to serve a term until the following spring, so that'll be next year.
Oh, I thought it was something about 60
So there
days.
would be,
No, the 60 days is during which time frame you have to appoint somebody to fill that vacancy, but I'm looking at how long that.
yeah, 60 days from today now, since
Yeah.
we approved the resignation. But,
Okay.
yeah, so technically, like when,
So it's from the day of the resignation or the?
so basically, it's gonna be like when I got elected with Jill, where I came in 4th and got a 1-year term to fulfill, I believe, Jessica Mead's term. Whoever is appointed now will go through the cycle of 1 year, come back to April, and when Danny, Dr. Deep, and JD run, there will be a 4th opening, and whoever comes in 4th gets 1 year. And I think Andy made that very clear in the article in the paper when he was asked about it.
And Mary Kay did confirm with Dean Dietrich, and that's uploaded in your board docs as well. If the board chooses to wait until the election is over, then could offer that appointment to the 4th place candidate.
So letter E of our policy states that if the vacancy is not filled within 60 days of the date on which the vacancy first exists, which in our case would be February the 10th, that's whenever she said that her resignation, so not tonight, but February the 10th, according to our policy, the vacancy shall be filled by the appointment of the board president. So we don't have 60 days from tonight. We have 60 days from
If you don't fill it by
February
April
10th.
8th or April 9th, Andy Mary could fill it.
Could appoint somebody, exactly. So I like Dr. Deep's plan that we've done for
Yes, we
other
all
times.
have, yeah, we have followed this all along. I think we should do the
Absolutely.
same thing, and other members of the board can weigh in on who can serve.
Okay, I'm kind of confused, all right. I'm filling a vacancy that opened up when, who resigned last summer.
Jim Balzer.
Yeah, so now I've got to
But,
run
but,
again.
but you
this
have to
April.
run for election because at any time, if the vacancy for a board member falls or occurs before the second Tuesday in October.
Okay, all right.
So you came in before that, that's why you have to run now.
Okay.
If somebody had
It's
resigned.
It's the end of his term.
Right, you're
Yeah, I'm
just filling out
filling in that
Balzer's
term.
term,
Right.
but you can only do it until the next spring election.
Okay.
Whereas if supposing you were appointed in November or December,
Yeah.
you would have had until the following April
Okay.
to run for election. So whoever we appoint would be probably about a little over a year.
Correct.
All right.
So Dr. Deep, you're submitting that interview letters needs to be into the district office by March the 4th, Friday, March the 4th. And then we will interview them on March the 8th.
Yes, sir. That's up to the board to decide, I'm just suggesting
Yeah.
that if you guys vote on it and agree with it.
And then, from what I heard, they would be seated at the March 22nd meeting. Yep.
Dr. Deep, you want to put that in a motion?
I'd be happy to.
I would second that motion.
I'm gonna do sure, with the roll call on that.
Could you read the motion, please, when you get it figured out?
Okay, I make a motion that the board call for nominations to fill the open position. Thank you. The open position due to the resignation of Angel Zimmerman, and that we call for nominations that can be filled, that have to be submitted to Mary Kay / the school district board by Friday, the 4th of March at noon in the district office, and that the board interview the candidates for that position on March 8th during the committee of the whole meeting at the IMC here at the middle school. And any candidate who is appointed as a result of that interview process will assume that position at the March 22nd meeting of the board.
And I will second that.
Again.
Again.
Okay, and just so that person is clear, they'll have a one-year term, whoever gets
The
appointed.
term to end at the April, I don't know what
Election in
the-
2023.
What do you normally put, we just ask for a resume and a little one paragraph about why they want to be on the board? Is that what, they can email it to you, or is that?
Actually, just express interest,
Right,
and
right.
then the questions related to why and, anything the board wants to ask would happen at the interview.
Because typically we just, I don't know if Andy or you came up with them versus letting us ask
Well-
creative questions on the fly, which would be a lot more fun, but
Well, both times when I came in as second string, the resume and a letter, and then the questions, so the interview.
And I'll submit that to the journal tomorrow, hopefully then get it in
And on
Friday.
our social media sites too, for
Right.
the district.
Right.
And the questions are derived from Julie. They're not given to any board member because that happened a few years ago in Wausau, and a board member leaked some of the questions to a candidate, and that came out. So we don't see those questions until
We don't
March
want
the
to
8th.
until
We don't want to
March
see
8th.
them until March the 8th. So Julie makes up some great questions.
I will now.
And if if there are more candidates, I would recommend that we have a few set of questions in case it goes beyond the initial ones, in case people want to
Okay.
ask more questions, maybe back up to the backup questions.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's do our roll call vote, just to make sure we all agree.
Gagnon,
Yes.
Maddox Nelson,
Yes.
Newfeld,
Yes.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Bardo,
Yes.
Deep,
Yes.
Schrader,
Yes. Okay, motion passes. Report of district new hires.
I move the board approve the following new hires: Andrew Maurer, high school limited term ELA teacher.
Second that?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion
Sure,
passes.
it's salary.
It is, that's true. But I think we're happy to have him, so I'm gonna call that good.
You are the president.
Okay, and let's move on to item K, report of donations.
I move the board accepts the following donations: $225 from various donors for Environmental Education Center at Neboken in memory of Dick Strang. $485 from the Antigo Swim Club for AQC timing equipment backup buttons. $3,380 from the Center Court Club for the high school varsity uniforms. $500 from the Mary family for the Antigo High School band uniforms, and $300 from Jane Newfeld for the Antigo High School band Rose Bowl trip for a total of $4,890.
Second.
And I just want to add, when I called her and thanked her for her donation, she reluctantly told me it was from Teresa and Katie and her, that she had listed in their years they graduated and what instruments they played, but it was from the three of them.
do you want me to amend those?
No, because in the paper, they said, today's paper, they said it was for me.
Oh, I didn't see
Yeah, it said I donated, and then I was feeling kind of guilty, but I'm trying to redo the kitchen, so I don't know.
Well, get out your checkbook, that'll take care of the guilt.
Okay.
Yeah, so,
We just, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Okay, and the next board meeting, March 22nd, 2022. Do we have a
Motion to adjourn.
Second.